But I did not feel that it was just another hot topic we, as most good churches, could just bury and wait for the fire to go out. The first instance that struck me this week was the Nehemiah Grigo story that unfolded in the early part of the week. As many of you know, Nehemiah was a normal 15-year-old living in Albuquerque with his parents and 3 siblings. His father, the Reverend Greg Grigo, lived a tumultuous childhood and then turned his life around, making the conscious decision to raise his family in a home committed to loving themselves, loving the world, and doing God's service. Greg not only served at the church, but he was a military and prison chaplain. He was a great worker for social justice by helping individuals rehab that were down on their luck. And he also served at the local homeless shelter. The family was always included on his important work. The house was always free from violent toys and games and seemingly stood as a monument to define justice. That is, all until a week ago, when Nehemiah was able to get a handgun and rifle at his dad's and systematically shot his mother and siblings, and then waited to ambush his dad after his dad had just spent a long night, overnight, at the shelter. Working for the homeless was the last thing Greg Grigo ever did. And now it was the next day that I got a second jolt into this new reality when I visited a neighborhood hardware store close to the Family Promise Day Center. As I neared the checkout, my eyes immediately turned to a display at the end of the counter containing 2 kinds of 12-inch miniature guns. Timed just perfectly, wasn't it? All standing at attention, waiting to be purchased. One style was a hunting rifle all decked out with a high-power scope. The other was a fully automatic weapon, like that one, that you might see on the battlefield. I was in such disbelief that I had to actually pick one up to figure out what the point of all this was. How awkward, I thought, as I picked up the scaled-down model, trying not to point it at anyone when I was looking at it. What I finally discovered is that these very authentic-looking objects were actually flicker lighters. Who would have ever guessed it? Not something really that I would feel comfortable lighting the fire in my fireplace or lighting the altar candles in church. And finally, my third sign came from a co-worker at the day center that very same morning. When sharing the story of my new find at the hardware store, this friend told me about his next-door neighbor, who was a single mother of a 22-year-old troubled son. She makes light of the fact that she has a loaded .38 caliber pistol under her pillow for protection, as well as a loaded shotgun in the closet just in case. Now, he laughed as he told me the story, but his eyes told me a different story. And his unease that I saw in those eyes definitely didn't go unnoticed. Now again, let me tell you that I don't have an agenda here. After all, I was raised hunting small game with my dad, and I liked it. As I look back over those days, I'm not sure if I enjoyed the hunting itself or just being on an outing with Dad. But either way, I do understand the enjoyment of hunting and having firearms to be used in that way. I do, however, have some concerns around the kinds of weaponry available to just anyone and the regulations on how such guns are stored and how many rounds can be purchased at a time. And from a theological standpoint, it is hard to justify anything that can take life. Whether a gun or a knife or a bottle or a syringe or an electric chair or anything else. It's just the way it is with God. Again, we can turn to these words of Jesus when he says in the 5th chapter of Matthew. Here's another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Here's what I propose. Don't hit back at all. If someone strikes you, stand there and take it. If someone drags you into court and sues for the shirt off your back, gift wrap your best coat and make a present of it. And if someone takes unfair advantage of it, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more tit for tat stuff. Live generously. You're familiar with the old written law, love your friend and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer, for then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. He gives his best, the sun to warm and rain to nourish, to everyone, regardless, the good and the bad, the nice and nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. In a word, what I'm saying is grow up. Your kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously toward others the way God lives toward you. Here we see that there's no room for getting back at anyone or a way to ward off the bad guys. Not in God's kingdom. Now, any way you slice it, this loaded issue is sticky on both a federal and faith level. And I understand that. But as we continue to ponder these hard questions and find where we personally stand on them, my hope is that we also consult Scripture and we let our government officials, with our prodding and suggesting, use their best skills and best manners in coming up with ways that we can actually protect some lives. So what do taxes and gun control have to do with one another? Actually, quite a bit. They are both ways our contemporary Caesar chooses to govern. While the amount assessed and the way it's used is always in question, our taxes are the very foundation of our economy. Without them, the lives that we enjoy as citizens of this nation would be quite different. In the same way, without our government being able to assess controls on who can have what weapons and how those weapons can be used and stored, our safety is inevitably at risk. Just like the stories I shared earlier, it is a real bite to think of all the ways that we contribute to the government only to see our dollars being spent on overpriced hand tools, extravagant business trips, and elaborate cover-ups. But with all the hassles of government, there is no denying the fact that tax dollars go to maintain the luxuries that we all enjoy. Now it's time for us to take seriously all the facts surrounding this gun control issue. Whatever the outcome, it's not going to please everybody. Just like prohibition outlawing the manufacture, transport, and consumption of alcohol, women's suffrage, ultimately giving women the right to vote, or Brown versus Board of Education calling for desegregation of public schools, or Roe v. Wade legalizing yet regulating abortions. Such legislation was wildly popular among some and absolutely hated by others. But it was a way that we could participate in government to help work for the common good. Such good has come out of problematic situations that we addressed through our government. As we continue this debate and many more, and acknowledge the fact that there could be a lot more fragmentation along the way before it's done. Let us not forget those faithful words of Jesus, so wisely suggesting that we should give Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and we should dedicate the rest of our lives to the service of our God. With any luck, with our pushing and prodding, with our suggesting, the two may actually be closer to one another than we